The movie opens up with a couple, Mike and Johanna, spending some romantic time in their house. Mike, who's a novel writer, requests Johanna to help him finish his book. After they're done, the two get intimate and enjoy their time. In the next scene, while Mike is busy attending to the passionate readers of his book, signing autographs for them, Jo walks out of the bookstore and visits the nearby clinic. Unfortunately, when she tries to cross the road, an incoming truck hits and smashes her hard. Unbeknownst to what has happened, Mike hears the commotion and approaches the crowd. Outside, he's shocked to see Jo in such a gruesome condition and lifts her from the ground crying. The medical team also arrives there in no time, but only to declare her dead. The scene then shifts to Jo's funeral, after which Mike meets his manager Marty, who suggests he continue writing novels. Marty also mentions that Jo always supported him and helped him write the novels. If she were alive, she would always want her husband to be on the top sellers list. Hearing all this, Mike gets encouraged, so he agrees to start writing a new book. Next, Mike is with his brother Sid at a bar talking about how much he misses his wife already. He talks about their property in Dark Score Lake, where Jo used to spend most of her time. He then suspiciously asks his brother if he visited the property on a regular basis. After a while, Mike reveals that Jo was 9 weeks pregnant when she died, and he doubts that the baby was his. This is because the doctor had informed him that his sperm count was low, which left him unable to bear a child. However, Sid denies being with Jo and urges Mike to not think anything unnecessary about her. At night, Mike tries to sleep but gets several panic attacks. He cries profusely, remembering his late wife. The following morning, Mike sits to write a novel, but he cannot concentrate at all. At the same time, his manager calls him and orders the novel to be written within 3 months. Unwillingly, Mike accepts the proposal and pulls out a draft of an old book that he had written about a decade ago. In the next scene, a small girl can be seen walking up to Mike and requesting him to save her mother, who is trapped inside a house. Suddenly, as they're standing in front of the house, they hear a loud scream, and the glass windows break into pieces. It's then revealed that everything was Mike's dream. A call wakes him up, and on the other side is Bill Dean, the caretaker of his house at Dark Score Lake. Bill informs Mike that a group of local boys entered the property last night and broke 2 of the windows. Mike immediately approves the repair and also orders Bill to prepare the house for his stay. He believes that he can focus more on his writing if he goes to a new place. Some days later, Mike sets off to the lake house, where he's warmly welcomed by Bill. After getting his belongings inside, Bill expresses his condolences for Mike's loss and mentions that Jo was liked by all of their neighbors. Hearing this, Mike inquires if she used to be accompanied by someone while she stayed in the house. Bill reveals that she sometimes brought her friends for dinner and small celebrations. Later at night, Mike goes to the studio upstairs, where Jo used to spend most of her time painting. He then sits down to start writing, but no ideas come into his mind. Because of this, Mike believes that it was Jo who always helped him write the novels. He then asks for a sign to prove that she is with him. Surprisingly, as soon as he says so, a bell hung downstairs rings once. This makes Mike very happy, and he believes that Jo is still looking after him. The following morning, after returning from a morning walk, Mike tries to get some food for himself and approaches the refrigerator at home. Suddenly, the letters pasted on the fridge start to move on their own, depicting "Hello, Mike." Right then, he hears a loud, disturbing scream and closes his ears to avoid it. The scream is interrupted when the housekeeper arrives there. Mike welcomes her and asks for some suggestions on where he can have breakfast. Brenda replies that he should visit a place called Jellison's Cafe and order a village burger. Afterward, on his way to the cafe, Mike sees Kira DeVore, a little child, strolling down the center of the road. With cars passing by at great speed, Mike picks her up and takes her back to his car. Right then, the little girl's mother, Maddie DeVore, arrives there and gets relieved to see Kira safe and sound. Surprisingly, she seems to know Mike and even claims that she's one of his biggest fans. Later, while in the cafe, Mike learns from the owner that Maddie's late husband was the son of Max DeVore, a wealthy and powerful local who disapproved of his son's marriage to Maddie. After Maddie killed her husband when he tried to drown their daughter, Max, who's wheelchair-bound and well into his 80s, wants custody of his granddaughter. Now he's using his resources and clout to portray Maddie as a careless mother. Saying this, the cafe owner tells Mike to stay away from Maddie and her little girl, as Max could go to any lengths to get custody of his granddaughter. In the following scene, Mike returns to the lake house, where he surprisingly gets a call from Max. The old man got to know of Mike's meeting with Maddie and Kira, so he is called to threaten him. After some time, a police officer visits Mike at his house and urges him to be at court the following day. He reveals that Mike has been accused of interrupting Kira's custody case. Later at night, Mike sees Jo in his dream, where she asks him to help Maddie and the little girl. She also tells Mike to begin writing and assures him that she's always around him. Using this as a motivation, the next day, Mike acts kindly toward Maddie by hiring custody lawyer John Storrow to fight her case against Max. Over time, despite their almost 2-decade age gap, Mike begins to develop feelings for Maddie. One day, she hugs him affectionately and thanks him for his help. She then takes him to Kira's school and the two stroll around together, talking about his style of writing. Mike reveals that he's planning to publish one of his old books this summer, and Maddie wishes him luck. That night, we see Mike looking at Jo's picture on his laptop and trying his best to write a story for his new novel. Surprisingly, this time he's able to write, overcoming his writer's block situation. One day, as Mike is engrossed with his novel, he hears a sound coming from the nearby bathroom. Surprisingly, when he enters the bathroom and looks at the bathtub, he notices a little girl drowning and asking for help. Mike immediately rushes to the girl and tries to help her. Right then, the housemaid arrives there and startles him. It is then revealed that Mike was simply imagining all of this. To get out of the awkward situation, he pretends to clean the bathtub. In the next scene, Mike goes to the storeroom and finds some books containing stories about the Dark Score Lake. He also gets a book about a female singer, Sarah Tidwell, and realizes that Jo is trying to tell him something about her. Right then, Maddie arrives outside the house and knocks on the door. Seeing her, Mike quickly opens the door and allows her in. In a happy tone, she reveals that his lawyer has found some connections of Max bribing the senior judge to get custody of Kira. She believes that with this evidence, Max will be put to the sword once and for all. Maddie then thanks Mike for all the help and even kisses him before driving away in her car. Unfortunately, when Mike returns to his room, he finds it in a total mess and assumes that Jo is angry with him. He then finds a video of Sarah Tidwell playing on his iPad and also a cassette by her name. With this, Mike realizes that the ghost of Jo is trying to assist him in solving the mystery of Sarah Tidwell, a blues singer whose spirit is said to be haunting the house. The next morning, when Mike goes out for a run, he experiences something weird and encounters Max and his personal assistant, Rogette. The two again ask him to leave Maddie alone, and Rogette almost succeeds in drowning him in the nearby lake. However, Mike somehow manages to survive the attack and returns home. Later at night, the police officer from earlier visits him again and threatens him to stop assisting Maddie if he wants Max to pull out of the custody case. Suddenly, in a dramatic change of events, Max DeVore kills himself, supposedly freeing Maddie and Kira from his control. Next, while Mike sits to begin writing for his novel, he falls asleep and gets a vision of Sarah Tidwell singing in the Dark Score Crazy Fair. Suddenly, a little girl comes running to him and asks for help. Mike picks up the girl and rushes to an abandoned place to hide. There, he again meets Sarah, who reminds him of Max's sayings that custody includes responsibilities. Hearing this, Mike wakes up from his dream and becomes scared. He then receives a call from Maddie informing him that Max took his own life and that she's now free with Kira. Surprisingly, she invites him for dinner at her house, saying that Jo would always want him to be happy. The following day, Mike attends Max's funeral, where he notices an old man crying and being taken to a nursing home. Mike follows him to the nursing home and then asks him about Max. Initially, the old man refuses to speak, but after a lot of convincing, he finally introduces himself as Edgar White. He then reveals that he knew Mike's father, Harold, as they were best friends. Max was also a part of their group. Following this, Edgar begins revealing the incident that he's been hiding his entire life. The scene then flashes back in time to 1939 AD, when Edgar, Max, Harold, and their friends are at the Dark Score Crazy Fair watching one of Sarah's performances. As Sarah is beautiful and bold, Max decides to have some fun with her and follows her to the nearby forest. There, he tries to get closer to Sarah, but when she refuses him, he forcefully asserts himself onto her, with his friends grabbing her hands and legs. Unfortunately, Sarah's daughter Keisha notices this and screams. Max then urges his friends to catch Keisha and kill her before she can tell anything to the villagers. After a bit of chasing, one of the boys captures Keisha and kills her by drowning her in the lake. Seeing this, a devastated Sarah unleashes a curse on them. She mentions that the boys will kill their respective daughters themselves by drowning them. Back to the present, Mike goes to attend the dinner at Maddie's house, where she can be seen waiting for his arrival. As they converse, Mike reveals that he found out about what happened to Sarah Tidwell many years ago. He also knows why Maddie's husband tried to drown Kira. It turns out that the curse was passed on to him by Max, because the old man became wheelchair-bound, leaving him unable to drown the little girl. By the same logic, Mike would also try to kill his daughter because his father passed away long ago. Surprisingly, Maddie says that she already knew the story. She then reveals that Joe hid her pregnancy from Mike because she wanted to keep their upcoming children safe from the curse of Sarah. As the conversation goes on, the two hug and then start kissing each other. But suddenly, a gunman from outside shoots Maddie in her face and kills her instantly. Devastated, Mike follows the gunman and kills him before taking Kira away from the place. While driving back to the lake house, Mike is chased by the other descendants of Max. They ask him to give up on Kira and hand her over to them. However, Mike dodges them and drives away. In the process, he makes them collide against an electricity pole, killing everyone on the spot. At the lake house, Mike prepares to give Kira a bath, but at the same time, he gets several nightmares of his seniors drowning their daughters. He somehow manages to control himself and tucks Kira into bed. However, Mike still doesn't properly understand the enigma, and Joe's spirit is attempting to stop him from acting inappropriately. Afterward, Mike remembers something after looking at the fridge and heads to Joe's studio. There, he opens his laptop and, through the hints that he saw on the fridge, deduces that there's a bag of lye kept at the top of the shelf. After a bit of searching, Mike finds it and remembers feeling dizzy whenever he approaches a strange tree on his way back home. So, without wasting any time, he takes out his car, carries a spade, and drives toward the location of the tree. Soon, he reaches there and starts digging until he finds the corpses of Sarah and her daughter. Suddenly, Sarah's soul appears on the strange tree and starts torturing Mike. Fortunately, Joe also appears there in her corporeal form and fights Sarah, allowing Mike enough time to pour the bag of lye onto the corpses. The lye compels the remains of the dead bodies to decompose quickly, and Sarah's appearance disappears from the tree, finally ending the curse permanently. Following this, Joe also vanishes, but not before asking Mike to live happily and look after Kira. Later, Mike returns home and finds Kira inside the bathtub crying. As he approaches her, Max's assistant Rosette appears out of nowhere and attacks him. Fortunately, Mike defends himself and eventually kills her using a pair of scissors. Following this, the spirit of Maddie appears in the bathtub and bids Mike and Kira farewell. informing the little girl that she should now stay with Mike. In the last scene, Mike and Kira can be seen standing together and planning to change their place of living. When Mike asks Kira about what Maddie told her before vanishing, she reveals that her mother asked her to be a good girl and to not trouble Mike. The movie ends with Mike carrying Kira on his back and walking toward the lake.